And
What do you have there? What do you have there?
this is a Spindrift sparkling water, real squeezed fruit. This is not a commercial for them, but it does say real fruit tastes better. I'll take their word for it. No, it tastes fine. It says no sugar added, but it has a little bit of sugar for those that are wondering.
Okay.
We'll keep
healthy.
this part, but yeah, it's healthy. I'm sorry to rip you away from the Oscars, Colin. I know you were watching the Oscars.
The Oscars are going on. I don't understand pop cultures. I'm the oldest towny man. I'm like, I don't know anybody at the Oscars. Like, I don't watch award shows. I'm like, who are these people?
You don't my beard. You don't participate in America's beloved sport of celebrity worship?
You know, weirdly, no. I don't, weirdly.
I'll have to confess, I was watching the Oscars and got a little distracted. And people do like a whole thing where they root for the best picture. I don't think I've watched any of them, so I'm just rooting. I'm just like going off vibes. Like, this movie looks cool.
Yeah, you're doing the classic. I don't know what team to root for, so I'll just pick the color I like.
Yeah, who's the halftime performer?
Good question. I have no idea.
All right, so I think we're on episode 4. Is that correct, Colin? We're episode
That's what
4.
It says.
Back for another episode of Over the Loudspeaker. This is our March episode. We have a lot to talk about today, and we'll see how much of it we cover. This might be a 2-parter if we go over. We come back in April and continue the conversation. But before we jump into today's topics, let's do the headlines. Colin, you ready for the headlines?
I'm ready for the headlines. I got them right here. Bear in mind, these are February's headlines because March has only just started. But That's right. First up is City Council pays for big loans with sewer rate increases. So the City Council approved a series of rate increases to cover the cost of a new water treatment facility mandated by the state of California. The Water Resource Recovery Facility, or WRRF, is the largest utilities project in Hayward's history at nearly $500 million that will be paid for with a series of loans due to a lack of state and federal funding. Sewer rates are set to increase by 12% every year for the next 5 years to help cover the over $33 million per year payments the system will need to make to cover the cost of the loans. This has put ratepayers on fixed incomes in a tough spot, despite the city's stepped payment structure that gives discounts to those who use less water. This project will at least have no impact on the city's general funds because utilities are kept separate. Next up, we have HARD considering fencing for Weeks Park. In January, the Hayward Area Recreation and Park District, or HARD Board of Directors, considered plans to renovate Weeks Park. Among the upgrades, which did include some really nice things like a dog park and more parking and all this other stuff, but it also included a full perimeter fence that was on the plans in an effort to prevent unhoused residents from camping in the park. While HARD has made no decision on the fence, the idea caused outcry from local service providers for unhoused residents. When asked about the fence, HARD Board President Luis Andrade said that the fence was, quote, a way to better enforce park hours and control vandalism, end quote. He also said that HARD has fences around other parks that are, quote, both functional and attractive, end quote. The HARD general manager refused to make any comments in writing on the matter. Lastly, the big stories this month have been HUSD making massive cuts to their budget. The Hayward Unified School District saw a plan to cut $54 million from the budget, including large cuts to teachers, office staff, and managers. The cuts were primarily focused on the district office staff, but also included custodians, teachers on special assignment, or TOSAs, family engagement specialists, and elementary vice principals. The board was split on the proposal, with trustees Buffette and Okenda largely silent on the matter, while trustee Prada was vocal about needed changes. But when Superintendent Ryman reminded the board that any changes would need to be offset by cuts elsewhere, she offered no suggestions. Trustee Bruckner-Carrillo called for more transparency and closer inspection of ongoing contracts in an effort to save more jobs. Further coverage of the final vote, as well as the sudden placement of the superintendent on administrative leave, which happened at a 2 a.m. closed session, which is bonkers. That coverage is going to come soon. The meeting's 9 hours. it's a lot. So I haven't had a chance to get into it yet, but I will. And if you'd like to learn more about these headlines and more, please subscribe to the Hayward Herald at haywardherald.substack.com. The Hayward Herald is your only source of independent Hayward news, delivered to your inbox at least twice a week. Please subscribe and share our stories with your friends and family. I love the banner. It's so good.
It never gets old. Collin, I'll say you're becoming the Amy Goodman of the Hayward area. With you running through the headlines.
That's very high praise.
I only give out high praise. Take that however you'd like. It made me think of the Weeks Park fence situation. Are we going to have another Berkeley? What are those? Containers to use as fences. Have you seen People's Park in Berkeley?
For people. Yeah, I saw pictures. I don't think it's going to be that bad. I wasn't at the meeting and they didn't record that part of it, but I'd wager they're probably going to do the usual that they have, like 8-foot wrought iron fences. I will say that Andrade held up as an example the fences around Kennedy Park, which number one do not fully enclose the park and are about 3.5 feet high.
Yeah.
And mostly I think are to prevent people from walking onto railroad tracks. But,
right.
Maybe that's the same thing. I don't know.
Interesting. Okay. Well, stay tuned. We'll see how that turns out.
Yeah.
We have a segment that I'd like to introduce, which is hearing from the people of Hayward, questions from Instagram. I don't know if we're going to keep that segment title, but that's what I'm calling it for now.
Questions. Bring the engagement, people. More questions is more good.
So this is, and we'll do it a little post editing. You should be seeing a nice little question up on the screen right now, and it says, "Thoughts on the bike lane project on Hayward Boulevard? Considering e-bikes will lower barriers for going uphill." I don't know what that necessarily the second part of that question means. I think maybe, and that's from our lovely follower at bikes.hayward. I'm assuming that making an argument for Hayward Boulevard bike lanes, e-bikes, making that ride a little bit easier, especially considering you might have to do a pretty steep ride up Carlos B to get onto Hayward Boulevard. One of the reasons I have never biked up that hill and probably never will is just how steep that hill is. But Collin, what's going on with the Hayward Boulevard bike lane? Is it a proposal? Is it where are we in the process?
So it's a proposal that came to the Council Airport and Infrastructure Committee. And so this is the first time.
Airport and Infrastructure Committee.
You got to bundle it all together. But basically what happens, what they're looking at is narrowing some of the lanes down to one lane on upper parts of Hayward Boulevard, past where Highland used to be, the school that is now going to be the future site of Bret Hart. So past that, looks like it's going to be down to one lane with some bike lanes and some narrowing and other stuff there. Apparently there was a bit of a furor where or even a to-do where the folks from the Old Highland Neighborhood Association, which is we can get into them later, but they came down to speak out against the project, citing all this stuff around more lanes is helpful for more traffic and all this other stuff. And the hard part is that makes a lot of sense, right? Like if you have congestion, you add another lane, and that makes the congestion go away. The problem is that traffic is really counterintuitive because of what's called induced demand. Like for example, the easiest example is the loop, right? We didn't used to have a huge freeway basically running through downtown until we made the loop, and all those extra lanes to relieve traffic incentivized more people to come that way, which just made the traffic bad again, worse now. So the idea is to make it a little harder, a little slower to go through there, to get people to slow down, because especially coming down those hills, you can go really, really fast. And also to make it so, as they mentioned with e-bikes, since that's a little more possible to get up that really steep hill. I went to Cal State East Bay for a long time, when it was Hayward even. And it's a nightmare. That's a very steep hill. Anyone who's driven up that hill knows that it's quite the climb. So some people would be like, oh, no one's going to bike up there. But, if you make it nice, people might wind up doing that.
Sure.
Especially since you have an e-bike to help you out and you're not like dying partway there.
Yeah, if you've got a little bit of an e-bike assistance or even maybe a bike elevator, they have those in places around the world, don't they? We'll put up a picture of it. You're seeing it here. I think that might be a little bit outside of Hayward's budget, maybe, to install a bike elevator for bikers that are going up
Dream
that way.
big.
But yeah, why not, right? So Collin, this is a project that started way back, right? We're talking like 2020. I mean, this has been going, this bike feasibility project has been in the works for a while now, or this feasibility study, I should say. So this isn't at least from the website and all the documents that you send me that I am forced to look at, say that this has been going on for some time. Since the early, 2021 was on hold for a while, and now they're revisiting and maybe coming up before a vote to be approved, or are we not there yet?
It'll probably have to go before the full city council, I think, to get approved. But it's working its way there. Government takes a long time. But the upshot is that is a lot of time to give some feedback, and as long as it's like, as I think Mary, our director of public works, said that there is, people complain about some of the bike enhancements, and he said, and there is also legitimate feedback as well. So there's, for example, the people turned out, and our own council member, George Syrup, who sits on that committee, was chatting about it, and he used to live up there. And so he made some solid arguments in favor of the change, but also said that, hey, maybe we don't need to do the entire thing all at once. We can focus on these specific areas, especially by the future site of Bret Hart and down, and then maybe in some other key places do that. And then maybe we can have further negotiations about some of the other parts that people were more concerned about. And maybe the plan will change. That's the reason we're supposed to be doing this like community outreach early, is so that there is a chance to give good feedback, constructive feedback, not just, no, don't change anything because change is bad, and really sort of work towards these compromises that work for everybody as best it can.
Yeah. So, maybe back to the question, thoughts on the bike lane project. What are your thoughts, Collin? I'm generally in favor of bikes. I ride a bike every now and then. I tend to not ride as often as I'd like because I feel like the infrastructure to ride bikes isn't really there. And so therefore I don't use my bike as often as I'd like. Or maybe if I'm doing a short ride, I'll get on my bike. If I'm going to go to a coffee shop or something that's nearby, I'll hop on my bike, get my coffee, come back. But I'm not using my bike necessarily to commute to work or to get anywhere sort of long distance. And if I'm riding, I'll ride, for pleasure, I'll go to like the shoreline or something. So, what's I think, my perspective is the more bike lanes, the better. It incentivizes the use of them. But then you also have to build in other sort of features, we could say, to further incentivize it, maybe even bike parking, right? Getting access to bikes, for folks who are low income. There's projects like that happen in places like San Francisco, where there's programs to get, especially those who don't have the means to get on a bicycle. So what are your thoughts?
Well, funny you should mention access to bikes, because fan of the show, Hayward Mayor Mark Salinas, he has actually been working. He's been working, believe it or not, to get access to that through his seat on the Alameda County Transportation Commission. He has a big plan, which is great to try and make sure that like all school kids in Hayward get access to a bike. And there was a great plan that I saw that was basically like, they had it tailored out for different ages of kids. So for the elementary school kids, they just rent because they're going to outgrow the bikes. And the ones in high school and older middle school, they would get to maybe keep the bike because that's like an adult sized bike anyway, and basically just get more bikes into the hands of kids. The problem, as you said, is you got to have a nice place to ride. And right now, a lot of it sucks. Like I know many people, some people who are like hardcore cyclists who will literally, one guy will drive to San Jose to ride his bike because driving here is so terrible. And he is like a capital C cyclist, like does a cycling team. Like he is Mr. Spandex, like doing it competitive style.
Nice.
And so having nice facilities that make it nice to ride, like that's going to get more people to actually take advantage of it. Because you can put the bikes in everybody's hands, but like, especially near where I live on Grand Avenue, it's like a super high injury corridor. Like, people are going 40 miles an hour and there's no bike lane and it's a bike route. You get like routed that way by Google Maps and it's fucking terrifying.
Right.
And so having safe places to ride, nice routes will incentivize, as you said, people to do that. And at the same time, there's an education component that's important because we've seen some of these projects around specifically Patrick Avenue and Gadding and in that area that have gone really badly. There's huge pushback from the people who lived there about losing street parking. And it just made the whole project the worst kind of thing where it's bad for bicycling and bad for the people who live there. So I think if we're go in the spirit of like trying to actually meet each other, then it can be a lot better. But it's not what America does,
Yeah, you reminded me. Actually, I think when door knocking in, I forget which neighborhood it was, but I remember door knocking, and that was one of the things that a resident brought up and was like, they put in these bike lanes, nobody even uses them, and we lost parking. That was a major gripe. So, one dream that I would like, or that I'd like to see, is the main. I mean, this would start a riot in the area, though. But it's just like the main thoroughfares, Hesperian, A Street, Mission, all of those just be like super bike friendly. If I tried biking down Hesperian, it's okay. It's not bad. It's a little scary. It's mostly scary. It's actually kind of a lot scary. But I would like, so, it's funny to see Hayward Boulevard, because I'm like, well, all right, cool. Yeah, I'm not going to be up there, but sure. But maybe this is the first start to many more thoroughfares being used or being upgraded so that they provide bikers the ability to bike safely.
Yeah, I think there's also, as you said, there's good ways of thinking about like where to do the bike infrastructure, right? So for example, doing it the main thoroughfares makes a lot of sense, except for the fact that even when you have like in South Hayward on Mission Boulevard, they put in the bollards and the really nice bike lanes on South Hayward, south of Industrial.
Oh yeah.
The problem is,
I remember,
people are still driving by at 40 miles an hour and it still sucks. Like it's still not a pleasant ride because it's still a highway. It's it's Highway 238. So
right, and people don't have anywhere to go there. I mean, it's like you can ride there, but it's purely for the ride. You're not going to get coffee. You're not going to get groceries. You're not going. It's not a productive ride necessarily, unless you're riding from, I don't know, like the BART station, the South Hayward BART station home or something. That's the only thing I can think of.
Or to Sonic.
I will put some respect on Sonic's name. Like, or Sonic. You're right.
Just park your bike in the car parking and have them roller skate out to you to bring you your food.
Exactly.
But no, like, so I think there's that. So I think like with all the development they're doing on Southern Mission Boulevard, I think there is some potential there for having, nice bike lanes and, as you said, nice bike parking, because you got to have somewhere to lock it up when you get there. This ain't Japan.
Right.
But the But there is still that fight. You have to slow down traffic to make it pleasant. Otherwise, like, if you want to look it up, you can see there was a hilarious video I saw of like bus drivers in like India or something, where they were forced to sit on a stationary bike and like pedal while a bus drives past them the same distance it would be on the bike lane at speed, and they almost crap their pants, like to a person, because it's terrifying. You don't want that. So you want to have a pleasant ride, but also, as you said, a productive one where there's stuff to do there.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge that we have in terms of getting outside of our sort of car-dominated lifestyles, is having a mode of transportation that's not just gets you from point A to point B, but it's, you can maybe stop somewhere and get a nice coffee or a beer, and it's nice to ride in. It's no one is going to want to use alternative modes if they feel like it's a pain in the ass to use, or it's unsafe, or so we can go through all the reasons why people don't, but clearly, at least on this show, we are advocates for getting alternative modes of transportation, public transportation, accessible public transportation,
absolutely,
into the hands of people, or I guess into the seats, or whatever, however that might look.
To the people.
To the people. There you go.
Eugene Debs, big advocate of the bicycle. Just saying.
Oh, well, there you go. Over the loudspeaker, listeners, look up Eugene Debs for those of you who aren't familiar.
It's true.
Great. Yeah. And, I think I'm looking forward to maybe this, I know that it's going to work, and for those of you who are listening and you're like, they're still talking about bikes. Maybe once we have phase 1, phase 2, because I was looking at some of the details, maybe this will incentivize us to get out there and do some biking and we can invite people to come join us. We could do an in-person thing. So anywho, for our many listeners, of course, that we have so many fans of the show now. It's incredible.
Hey, one of our shorts got 500 views on YouTube. So
look at that.
There you go. It's a growth industry.
All right. The next segment we have, I'm calling Big Ideas, Collin, because we're going to talk big ideas. Big ideas.
You're going to make a little intro for it?
There might be an intro, depending on how much time I have. If you are seeing an intro now, look at this marvelous intro. If you're not seeing an intro, it's because I ran out of time. I'm just putting big letters over.
Use your imagination.
Yeah. This new segment I'm calling Big Ideas, and we're going to talk about what might be some big ideas, or maybe just ideas. Some maybe not so big, but just sort of ideas, right? And I wanted to talk to you about this because I know you have an interest in this. I have an interest in this, and I think this project really is kind of part of that interest in this topic of municipalism, or municipal parties. But really, I sort of am going to use the umbrella term of municipalism to talk about the various ideas that sort of stem from that idea. I was trying to think of a succinct way to sort of define municipalism for those of you who have not heard of it, maybe you're hearing it for the first time. But really, it's and I had to do a little bit of homework myself to be like, how long has this idea been around? And it's been around for a while, right? And so in some ways, it's not a new idea. This is why I called it Big Ideas, not New Ideas. But it's something that's been around. You can even argue, the Commune of Paris, right, back in the is part of that sort of idea of municipalism. But I think we really kind of hit a peak of municipalism maybe in the last 10 years or so. I'm thinking 2015-ish is when you sort of saw this wave of folks who said, hey, let's pay attention to what's happening in our local city. Let's pay attention to what's happening in our backyards. And not just pay attention, let's try to make some change in the areas that we reside in, the areas that we live in. I'm thinking of places like Spain, or Barcelona to be exact, where there's Barcelona en Común, which elected, I think, the first woman mayor in that area. Also, not just internationally, but here in the U.S. as well, in Jackson, Mississippi, with Cooperative Jackson, which is, I think, slightly a different model. One of the things that as I was reading through some of the articles and different things where I've learned about municipalism is that there's this tendency to think of it strictly as a kind of an electoral strategy. Right? This is a way to get people elected, and then maybe have those people move on to bigger seats and, make change from the bottom up, which is, I think fair, solid, right? But I think that's a very limited way of thinking about this. But there is an electoral component involved if you're interested in that. So to me, municipalism is sort of this, in a very basic, succinct definition. Here's my definition, is that rather than looking at trying to enact change at some bigger level, like say the federal government or even the state government, that you're looking to make change locally, right in your city, right in your hometown. Collin, what how do you think about municipalism? Where did you first sort of get tuned in with this idea?
Gosh, I just trying to read around. I think you might have been one of the first people to mention the term to me. But I know I looked into it and, stumbled across, as you said, a huge umbrella is this municipalism. And it includes some things like some examples, like you said, but also some like stateless movements, like in the Middle East. There are certain stateless peoples who are then using the sort of some municipalist ideas to try and self-govern while also not having a physical state to call their own, which is a very cool idea, considering that's how humanity existed for a very long time, but also using that to work within a modern context. But for me, a lot of it focuses down, as you said, to just like thinking about the city, right? Like everything started from realizing that I had no idea who my city council members were. Like you can look up their names, but like who they are, what they believe in, was to me like a really big part of what prompted me to like dig deep into local government and local politics and the world around me. And also just the idea that like, I don't even know a lot about Hayward. Like it's very easy to live here, but because of commuting and jobs and all this other stuff, to live here, but not know very much about your home. Right. And I've lived here almost my whole life. So I'm still learning stuff. And it's not like they cover Hayward history in school very deeply, or anything like that. So it's just a desire to know more and want to be, the way I phrase it is like, I think it might've been Obi Kaufman who was saying that like, not to be from a place, but to be of a place, to like really know where you're from. Like for most of human history, right? You knew where you're from in like a really intimate way. Cause you worked the land, you ate the food that grew there, you knew all the people, you'd lived there all the time. Like that was your world. And now it's very easy for people to know more about what's going on in Washington, D.C. than what's happening in their own city council. And a lot of stuff happens, as we said, everything that impacts your daily life, from bike lanes to freeways and other things. How you even elect people is all like very, very locally controlled because of how our government's set up. And so if you want to affect change that's going to impact your daily life, local's a good place to start.
Well said. And, I think when I was similar to you, when I was trying to think about enacting change, especially during that period of like, 2015-ish, 2016-ish, it's like, oh, this seems the big sort of federal level politics, Washington, D.C., that seems like very much out of our control. And I think I think it's sort of fair to say that it's out of our control. There's going to be people who are like, well, if you just vote, okay, settle down, voters. You
don't even vote directly. It's electoral college.
Yeah, exactly. But I think there was this tendency for a lot of us, right? And I kind of think about like a good book. This is going to be my news segment. This is not a sponsored, but this is, oh God. Rebel Cities, I put the picture by David Harvey. Now it's floating in poop. I'm sorry, David Harvey. Rebel Cities great text. I think I've started it and haven't completed it, and I've started and completed it, but it's still a great text because I'm frequently revisiting it, and it feels like I can sort of read parts of it, put it down, go back to it, read parts of it. But he talks about the right to the city, and that's another movement. And so I'm sort of reflecting on maybe like the past 10 years and the different movements that have taken place. And I think that's part of of municipalism, is that it's sort of, those of us who think that change can be enacted locally are also thinking about the bigger picture in that sense, right? So it's not that we've sort of put our hands up and say we can't do anything to enact change at a much broader level, state, federal, but it's just to say that we think the local is important, and that there can be ripple effects that happen by enacting change at the local level. And we recognize that there's also limits to the local level, right? That there's only so much that you can do, that ultimately, the powers that be, the real sort of power is kind of in that Washington, D.C., that has the ability to wreak havoc all around the world, right? But that we sort of strategically are thinking about the city, the local, and sort of in a response also to like the globalization, right? Of like the introduction of free trade agreements all around the world that sent labor overseas, that made wealthy people even wealthier, right? And that in a lot of ways, our own backyards, our cities were super ignored and sort of left behind, right? Flint, Michigan, I'm sort of thinking about, as an example also. So, this is a conversation that I just wanted to just briefly touch on. I'm already seeing that we're going to need to do maybe a part 2 and even a part 3 of this, because I like this idea of kind of starting a topic, exploring it a little bit more, seeing where it leads us, and then maybe it sort of launching us into an adjacent related topic, which I wanted to talk to you about, Collin. We'll maybe give a little bit of a sneak peek for folks, is proportional representation. There's this whole movement to reform how our government elections happen, and the way in which political parties represent us. And, there's a lot of talk about maybe third parties, right? Whether they're effective or not, and the reasons why they're not effective. And so there's people thinking about making these changes at a higher level to make sure that the voices and opinions of those of us who maybe fall outside the traditional two-party model are still taken into consideration, right? So it feels like this is a launching pad to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I'm totally down for that. Also happy to have like a focused of each segment having a focus. The one thing I want to get out of my brain just for folks before we off municipalism is since we were talking about the built environment, is that obviously the local has a lot of control, and if you don't pay attention to it, the state and national interests trickle down into your actual built environment, not only with the loop, but in thinking broader. There's a book I want to pick up. It's probably a dry academic text, but it sounds very cool because it talks about like how cities developed. And one of the things they talk about specifically is after, as you mentioned, the Paris communes, the government decided to change how the city was built to get rid of all the little narrow walkways and all the other things, and to have these really wide boulevards. And part of it is obviously to just like the physical projection of power, but also because during the Paris communes, they had a very easy time just barricading and cutting off different parts of the city and like sort of blocking them off from the rest. But if you have these, 100-foot wide boulevards, you can't do that anymore. And it's easy to just roll a tank through it instead of having to crowd people one behind the other to like try and knock down this barricade. So it's also an expression of like actual physical power of like, we can then roll a tank through your barricade versus having to meet you on the same level. So it is like a longer term defense strategy where it's like we can quash uprisings much easier that way as an actual physical projection of power. So paying attention to that and pushing back on a local level prevents that sort of that passivity from allowing things like that to happen, or at least being able to try and make an effort to push back against it in some way.
I'm sorry. You started talking about tanks, and I was imagining a tank getting stuck in the loop and then trying to make its way down to City Hall, and it's like trying to make its way through B Street, and it's just smashing every car.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, if we had like pedestrian walkways and things like that, you could potentially make a spot where in order to get through it, they'd have to knock over some buildings versus like just driving down the road. So, you know, that's the idea, is making it people-centric versus vehicle-centric is not only good for the environment and good for your health, but also good for community defense, just to put that out there.
Yeah, I think, you know, for folks who maybe are new to the YouTube channel, you're saying, who are these two guys? You know, this is some, you know, this is what you get. You get really interesting deep dives on bike lanes, on tanks, community defense, you know, parks, you name it. No, but I think that's a great point, right? Because part of, I think, why I wanted to sort of just touch on lightly and hopefully pique some of the interest of viewers, if at all, right, around this topic, is because I think what we're doing is a little bit of an experiment around municipalism in Hayward. You know, and people are taking interest, especially, and, you know, to my great joy, right, is young folks are interested in what's happening in their towns, right, in their cities. Maybe they went off to college, maybe they came back and they're like, what's happening here? We want to know, we want to get involved. And they're also seeing that the local can have an impact on sort of a broader set of politics, right? We talked, I think, in an episode, 2 episodes ago, a little bit about like wins that happened locally, the divestment. You know, who could have seen that coming out of Hayward? You know, that
literally no one.
literally no one. And it's because, and it didn't happen overnight, right? These are sort of movements. You'll often hear me using that term, right? These are folks that are coming together with, you know, a particular worldview in which we say, you know, how do we create a more just and equal world? And, you know, what are some of the things that we can do to either, one, throw a wrench into the capitalist machine that continues to roll on or tries to steamroll over all of us, or provide an alternative path, right? And I think that's what municipalism has to offer, as this sort of wide umbrella that many of us can come under and sort of stay dry from the rain. So I'm excited to see where this project of municipalism in Hayward goes, right? There are various people, I think, working on various different aspects of that, including us too and others, right? Who we're doing this because we think it's important to get information and topics out to our neighbors and to our community. And think about what your role might be in this project around municipalism, right? Maybe there's something you're really interested in that you haven't seen happen. And I think that's the other part of it, right? Is like the potential for alternative spaces, for the culture, for the arts that currently isn't maybe happening, or maybe folks aren't seeing, that's a way to also sort of get into municipalism, or it is an aspect of municipalism as well.
Absolutely. Big umbrella. Come on in, friends. There's room for everyone. Come
on in. All right. So any last thoughts, Collin, before we wrap up? Who do you think won the big picture?
About the big, I like it. I like the big ideas. I'm excited. I always like big ideas. They're fun to talk about, and even if you don't get to reckon with them in their entirety, even just touching on them a little bit. You know, I'm a librarian by trade, so you spark someone's interest and get them reading something or get them interested into something and talking about it, you're already set.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, you can, for folks who are interested in looking into this a little bit more, you know, do a quick Google search, type in municipalism, put in Barcelona, Mrs. Cooperation Jackson, little Dave Harvey in that Google search, and you'll find some good stuff to read. And if you're not interested in reading, which not everyone is, right? Just people who aren't interested in reading. I don't understand it, but I get, education system. Well, let's type it into YouTube, right? You'll get a YouTube video about it. You might get this video up that comes up, but then there's going to be many others you can watch, and you can hear people, really smart people, talk about these things.
Much smarter than us.
Yeah, much smarter than us, and learn a little bit about what's going on in different parts of the world, get ideas from different parts of the world. That's my favorite thing to do, is say, like, what are folks doing out in different places? What would that look like here? How would it be different? Yeah. So anywho, all right, Collin.
Got another one in the can, I guess. Yes, always. Please follow, like, subscribe, hit the bell if you're a YouTube fan. If not, please follow us on Instagram, on Facebook. We're breaking into some of the Facebook groups, which is fantastic. Check us out on Substack, haywardherald.substack.com. And and you can always reach out to us. There's contact information around. You'll get a hold of us, and we'll help you out, answer questions, anything you like. We're here to help out.
All right, give it a like, follow, subscribe. See you all next month.
In the next one.